Still a poor waitress. How embarrassing, my brother's voice cut through the laughter like a knife scraping glass. The crowd at the Whitman ballroom froze for a split second, then chuckled. My mother's lips curled into that polite, poisonous smile she'd perfected over decades of social climbing. My father didn't even look up from his champagne, and I stood there, tray in hand, fingers trembling around a half-empty flute of Prosecco, while their words burned through me. They didn't recognize me, not under the cheap wig, not behind the catering uniform. That was the point. I wanted to see how deep their cruelty would go if I had nothing they could gain from. It was Ethan's wedding, a spectacle worth millions held at the Aurora Grand Hotel overlooking the Pacific. Chandeliers glittered like galaxies above white orchids and gold-trimmed glassware. My brother looked like the prince he'd always been told he was in his tailored navy tux, his perfect blonde wife at his side. The family name Whitman sparkled on every menu, every napkin, every whispered toast. For the guests, it was a celebration. For me, it was an autopsy of everything I'd lost. I wasn't supposed to be there. I had left that world 3 years ago, stripped of inheritance, dignity, and the illusion that family meant love. But when the catering company I now freelanced for landed the Whitman wedding, I said yes. Call it curiosity. Call it revenge. Mostly it was closure. I wanted to see their faces one more time, without the armor of money between us. The ballroom pulsed with piano music and champagne bubbles. Guests whispered about stocks, travel plans, and custom yachts. I moved through them quietly, balancing the tray like it was my shield. When I reached the head table, Ethan caught sight of me. He squinted, then smirked. "Hey," he said loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear. "Don't I know you from somewhere?" A few heads turned. My pulse was hammered. He leaned closer. "Oh, wait," he said with mock realization. "You used to live off Daddy's money, didn't you? Guess the catering life suits you." Laughter erupted. My mother's diamond earrings swung as she laughed too. "Ethan," she scolded playfully, "don't tease the help. It's not polite." Then turning to her friends, she added, "Honestly, who wants poor people hovering over a wedding like this?" The words landed like stones. I wanted to speak, to scream, to tear the facade apart, but I just nodded and walked away the way I used to as a child when silence was safer than truth. They'd disowned me once for choosing a different life, for walking away from the Whitman legacy to build something real. They'd said I was ungrateful, unfit, unnecessary. Now they were laughing at the ghost of the daughter they erased. Behind the ballroom doors, the kitchen buzzed with clattering pans and shouted orders. I leaned against the counter, closing my eyes, letting the sting wash over me. I could hear the muffled applause as Ethan made a speech about family honor and legacy. Legacy. The same word my father used when he rewrote his will, cutting my name out entirely. I had built my own legacy since then, just not one they'd ever imagine. Aiden's voice echoed in my mind, calm and steady. "You don't have to fight them to win, Claire. You just have to outgrow them." He'd said it 2 years ago, back when I was nothing but a freelancer running SEO campaigns for startups in cramped apartments. Back when he was just another quiet man in a worn hoodie sketching ideas on a coffee notebook. We were partners in secret building something from the ashes of our failures. No one knew what we were creating. Not yet. I pushed off the counter, fixed my apron, and stepped back into the noise. The crowd had loosened after hours of champagne. The band was playing at last. My brother and his new wife twirled in the center of the floor. My parents watched with pride, faces glowing under the chandelier light. To everyone else, they looked like the perfect American family. To me, they looked like everything that money could buy, and nothing it could fix. When the night finally ended, I stood near the back exit, the air heavy with perfume and spilled champagne. Guests stumbled out, laughing, arms wrapped around each other. My father brushed past me without seeing. My mother's perfume trailed after her sharp floral familiar. And then Ethan's voice again. "Next time, maybe bring us some ambition with those drinks, huh?" I turned to face him. He smirked, the same cruel grin he'd worn since we were kids. I held his gaze steady this time. "Don't worry," I said softly. "Next time you'll be the one serving." He laughed, dismissing me with a wave. "Sure, sis. Dream on." But I wasn't dreaming. I was remembering. Every late night, every risk, every signed deal under a different name. The foundation of the company we'd built brick by digital brick, invisible to the world. The empire that bore my name, my new name, C. West, a name that no one in that ballroom had ever bothered to ask about. When I got home that night, I peeled off the catering uniform and opened my laptop. My inbox blinked with a new message from Forbes subject confirming details for your Top 10 Young Billionaires feature, airing next week on national TV. I stared at it for a long time, then smiled. For 3 years, they'd called me poor, invisible, forgettable. In 7 days, the entire country would know the truth. And this time, when my name flashed across every screen, I wouldn't need to raise my voice. The world would do it for me. My parents used to say blood was everything. But when the check stopped clearing, my blood type changed. To them, I was no longer a Whitman, I was a problem they'd solved. I still remember the day they erased me, not with shouting, but with a calmness that stung worse than cruelty. My mother's voice was steady, her pearls glinting in the afternoon light. "Claire, we can't support someone who refuses to represent this family properly." My father didn't even look up from his newspaper. "You've made your choices," he said. "Now live with them." That was the day I walked out of the house I grew up in, no inheritance, no goodbye. Just the sound of the front door clicking shut behind me like a verdict being sealed. I had $28 in my wallet, a suitcase full of clothes that still smelled like wealth, and the uneasy thrill of knowing that for the first time in my life, I was free. Freedom, I learned quickly, doesn't come cheap. My first job was waiting tables at a diner off Ventura Boulevard, where the uniforms smelled of burnt grease and the customers didn't say thank you. The hours were long, the tips unpredictable. At night, I'd lie on a thrift store mattress in a studio apartment that shook every time the neighbor slammed a door, but it was mine. Every bill I paid, every meal I earned, it was the opposite of what the Whitmans stood for. And for that reason alone, it felt sacred. Some nights I'd picture them in their glass mansion in Beverly Hills, sipping wine pretending I didn't exist. They probably told their friends I was traveling or pursuing creative work. Anything but the truth that their daughter was serving hash browns at 2 a.m. I told myself I didn't care. But sometimes, when the radio played soft jazz like the kind we used to listen to during family dinners, I'd feel that sharp ache of loss, the kind that never fully leaves. It was during those nights that I started sketching business ideas in an old notebook, half-baked dreams scrawled between coffee stains and grease marks. Marketing for small businesses, social media for local stores, online branding strategies. They were just words back then, a way to keep my mind from drowning in what-ifs. I didn't know it yet, but those scribbles were the first blueprints for what would one day become my company. My parents never called. My brother never texted. I might as well have been dead. And in a way, I was the daughter they wanted had died the day I stopped performing for them. What remained was someone they couldn't recognize, someone who wasn't afraid to start at zero. About a year later, I ran into one of my mother's friends at a grocery store. Mrs. Langley, always perfectly dressed, always nosy. She spotted me in the frozen aisle pushing a cart full of off-brand cereal and discount coffee. Her lips tightened. "Claire," she said, eyes scanning my faded jeans and tired face. "My goodness, I didn't realize it was you." I smiled, even though my stomach twisted. "Hi, Mrs. Langley. How's the family?" "Oh, everyone's wonderful," she said quickly. "I saw your mother last week at the Philharmonic Gala. She mentioned you were living out of state." I met her eyes. Something like that. Her smile faltered. She glanced at my groceries, then back at me. "Well," she said, clearing her throat, "I'm sure you'll find your way." And just like that, she turned her cart and walked away, perfume lingering long after she was gone. I stood there, frozen aisle buzzing around me, and realized that no matter how far I ran, the Whitman name followed me like a shadow too heavy to carry, too sharp to forget. That night, I deleted my last name from my resume. I became Claire West, a clean slate, a woman who owed her success to no one but herself. The next morning, I registered a small freelance business, West Digital Strategies. I didn't have clients. I didn't even have a proper laptop. Just borrowed Wi-Fi from the diner and a relentless kind of hunger. I spent my breaks learning about algorithms, SEO, and branding. The same skills my family paid agencies hundreds of thousands for, I was mastering on an old laptop with missing keys. A few months later, my first client appeared, a small bakery struggling to survive. The owner, Mrs. Alvarez, didn't care about my past or my name. She just wanted results. I built her website, ran ads, and optimized her search rankings. Within 3 months, her sales tripled. When she handed me the check, she said, "You have a gift, sweetheart. You make people seen." Her words stayed with me longer than any compliment I'd ever received from my parents. You make people seen. That's what I'd always wanted, for someone to look past the name, the money, the expectation, and see me. From there, one bakery turned into 5 clients, then 10. My small business grew faster than I could keep up. Every late night felt worth it. Every rejection, every condescending look, it all built into something solid, something of mine. But even as I worked 18-hour days and watched my bank balance finally rise, part of me still looked over my shoulder. I'd see headlines about Whitman Group breaking new deals, about Ethan climbing higher, about my parents attending galas I used to dream of hosting. I told myself I didn't care. Yet every time I saw their photo, my family smiling like they'd never lost a thing, I felt that familiar spark of anger. It wasn't jealousy. It was justice waiting for its turn. The day would come when the name they'd erased would echo louder than ever, just not in their world. In mine. And when it did, I wouldn't need to call them. They'd find me. The first time I met Aiden Cole, he was standing in line at the diner where I worked, holding a sketchbook instead of a phone. He wore the kind of clothes that didn't announce money, but whispered intelligence, worn jeans, rolled sleeves, and a calm that didn't belong in a place that smelled like burnt coffee and fryer oil. When he ordered, he looked me in the eye, something most customers never did. "Black coffee, no sugar," he said, then smiled faintly. "You look like someone who doesn't plan to stay here long." I froze with the coffee pot in my hand. "Excuse me?" He shrugged. "You have that look, people who serve but think." It was such a strange thing to say that I almost laughed. Instead, I poured his coffee. "Thinking doesn't pay rent," I said. "Not yet," he replied, taking the cup. "But it builds something that does." That conversation lasted less than a minute, but something about it lingered long after he left. Maybe it was the quiet certainty in his tone, or maybe it was because no one had spoken to me like that in years, not like I was invisible, but like I was in the middle of becoming. He came back the next day, and the next, always with the same sketchbook, always the same order. Sometimes he'd draw diagrams, sometimes wireframes, sometimes strings of code that looked like poetry written in another language. One night when the diner was empty except for him, I asked what he was working on. "A system," he said, simply. "Something that helps small businesses manage their digital presence automatically." "You mean like an agency?" He shook his head. "No, an ecosystem, one that lets the little guys compete with the big ones." I laughed softly. "Sounds like a fantasy." He met my eyes. So was the flight. After my shift ended, he waited outside. We walked down the quiet street, neon lights reflecting off puddles from the evening rain. "You're good with people," he said suddenly. "You understand how they think. That's rare." I frowned. "You don't even know me." "Sure I do," he said, grinning. "You're the woman who's been writing SEO ideas in that notebook for months." My jaw dropped. He must have seen me scribbling during breaks. "You were spying, observing," he said. "And I think you've got something. You just need structure." He told me he'd left a high-paying job in Silicon Valley after getting tired of watching billion-dollar companies swallow small ones whole. "The tech world runs on greed," he said. "I want to build something that runs on fairness." We talked for hours that night about ideas, about what success meant, about how the internet had turned visibility into currency. I told him about my family, how they'd erased me. He didn't flinch, didn't pity me, just said, "Then you build your own name, and make it too valuable for them to ignore." That sentence hit me like a spark. Over the next few weeks, we started meeting after my shifts. I'd bring coffee, he'd bring notes. We'd sit in the corner booth of the diner until sunrise drawing business models on receipt paper. He showed me how algorithms worked, how analytics could predict behavior, how data could be a weapon if you knew how to wield it. I learned faster than I thought possible. One night after a particularly long brainstorming session, Aiden closed his laptop and looked at me. "You know what your problem is," he said. Besides sleep deprivation, he smiled. "You're still waiting for permission. From them. From the world. From someone to say you're allowed to win." I stared at him. "And what's your problem?" He leaned back. "I don't wait for anything. That's why I get into trouble." It was then, between coffee rings and exhaustion, that he proposed a partnership. "You handle the creative and outreach side. I'll build the tech. We split everything 50-50. I hesitated. "You don't even know if I can do this." "I don't need to," he said. "You've already been doing it. You just didn't call it business yet." We registered the company the next morning under a name that felt more like a whisper than a declaration. Wavelength Systems. It sounded like connection, like motion, like something alive. Our office was a one-bedroom apartment in Glendale with cables snaking across the floor and whiteboards covering every wall. Days blurred into nights, nights into mornings. We built, tested, failed, rebuilt. There were times I wanted to quit, times when money ran out and bills stacked higher than my confidence. But every time I faltered, Aiden would remind me, "They can take your name, Claire. They can't take your work." 6 months in, we landed our first client, a small travel agency struggling to survive online. Within 2 months, their bookings tripled. By the end of the year, we had a dozen more. And just like that, Wavelength became a quiet storm. Still, I kept my identity hidden. I didn't want the Whitmans to find out, not yet. Every contract, every email, every interview was signed simply C. West. The anonymity gave me freedom. No expectations, no past, just results. One night after a long day, Aiden handed me a glass of wine. "You realize," he said, "we're building something that could change the way people see success." I looked at him, exhausted but proud. "No," I said softly. "We're building something that proves people like me can win without a last name." He raised his glass. To Wavelength. I raised mine. To start over. Outside, the city hummed with life. Inside, for the first time in years, I felt alive too. I didn't know it then, but that night marked the beginning of the end for everything the Whitmans believed in. Because while they were throwing charity galas and polishing reputations, I was quietly building an empire. And soon the world would know which one lasted longer. The first office that officially bore our company name wasn't an office at all. It was an abandoned print shop with flickering lights and a leaky roof. The landlord called it charming. I called it affordable. We painted the walls ourselves, patched the leaks with duct tape, and built desks from plywood. It wasn't glamorous, but it was ours. The day we hung the crooked sign that read Wavelength Systems, Aiden turned to me and said, "It's not about where we start, it's about who'll regret not believing in us." He was right. The months that followed were brutal. We lived on instant noodles and coffee strong enough to dissolve our anxiety. We pitched clients who ghosted us, coded through the night, and fought over whether branding should feel human or strategic. I wrote a copy for strangers while pretending it didn't hurt that my own family hadn't spoken my name in 3 years. But every small success felt like proof that I'd made the right choice walking away. Then came the break. A regional furniture brand, Leighton & Company, was losing customers to online competitors. Their marketing director, a soft-spoken man named Samir, took a chance on us after seeing an article Aiden posted about human-driven algorithms. We promised him results in 30 days. For the first time, we had a contract that could pay 2 months' rent if we delivered. We worked like we were possessed. Aiden built an automation tool that could predict buying behavior based on search patterns. I wrote campaigns that spoke to customers like people instead of numbers. 30 days later, Leighton's sales jumped 40%. Samir called half in disbelief, half in gratitude. "Whatever you did," he said, "keep doing it. My boss thinks I'm a genius." That one client opened the floodgates. Word spread fast, quietly, but steadily. Other struggling brands reached out. Small family-run businesses that had been buried under corporate giants suddenly wanted Wavelength. And the more we helped, the more we learned that power wasn't about being seen. It was about being indispensable. Aiden started talking about scaling. I started talking. The email arrived on a Tuesday morning. Subject line, exclusive interview request, National Business Weekly. I blinked at it for a full minute, half convinced it was spam. But it wasn't. They wanted to feature Wavelength Systems in their Rising Innovators column. It wasn't a big feature, but it was national. Aiden grinned when I showed him. Told you, he said, sipping his coffee. They can't ignore us forever. I didn't tell him that the timing made my stomach twist, because that same week my brother Ethan and his wife Serena had just been profiled in Forbes' The Golden Couple of Real Estate. Their smiling faces were everywhere. I scrolled through the article through the photos of their mansion and designer suits, and then at the very bottom I saw it my father's quote. Family legacy is about excellence, he said. And Ethan embodies that. No mention of a daughter. No hint that I'd ever existed. The next morning I woke to hundreds of notifications. Our article had gone live, The Hidden Duo Disrupting Digital Marketing. My name wasn't fully listed, just C West. Still, the comments poured in, the site traffic exploded, and a few investors started calling. For the first time in my life, I was being noticed for my work, not for my bloodline. Aiden watched me read the article for the 10th time. You okay? Yeah, I said, though my hands were trembling slightly. It's just strange, being seen. He smiled. Get used to it. The quiet ones always make the loudest impact. That week changed everything. We moved into a real office downtown, nothing fancy, just glass walls and sunlight. Clients started flying in. Wavelength wasn't a secret anymore, but neither was C West. People began asking about the mysterious founder behind the tech. Who is she, they wondered online. What's her story? Part of me wanted to stay hidden forever. Another part, the one that had spent years watching my family rewrite history, wanted to scream my name from every rooftop. And then out of nowhere, I got an invitation. It came in a heavy cream envelope embossed with gold lettering, Whitman Family Foundation Gala, Beverly Hills. My parents' annual charity event attended by every name that mattered in LA. The irony almost made me laugh. 3 years earlier, they'd erased me from the family registry. Now my company's logo, Wavelength Systems, was listed as a digital sponsor in their press kit. Aiden found me staring at the invitation. You thinking what I'm thinking, he asked. Probably not, I said. Because what I'm thinking is reckless. He smirked. You mean satisfying. I shouldn't have gone. Every rational part of me knew it. But revenge has a way of sounding reasonable when it's dressed like closure. So I RSVP'd yes. The night of the gala, I traded my usual work blazer for a sleek black dress that clung in all the right places. My hair was no longer the dull brown my mother used to call plain. It shimmered under the ballroom lights, a deliberate declaration that I no longer belonged to their world, but I could own it if I wanted. When I arrived, cameras flashed. I kept my face angled just enough to stay mysterious. The banner behind the red carpet read, Whitman Foundation Annual Benefit. The irony was exquisite. Inside champagne flowed, laughter echoed, and my mother's voice cut through the crowd. Darling, look who's here, she said, wrapping her arms around Serena, my perfect sister-in-law, who sparkled in gold sequins. The Whitman legacy looks divine tonight. I stood at the edge of the room, unseen, watching them play their parts. Ethan charming as ever, shaking hands and talking about innovation as if he'd ever built anything in his life. My father, aging but dignified, held court near the donors. My mother floating like royalty. They were beautiful, cold, familiar. Then from the stage, Ethan took the microphone. I want to thank my family, he said, especially my parents for teaching me what real success looks like. Applause erupted. I sipped my drink. He kept talking, but my attention drifted to the digital banner looping behind him, the event sponsors scrolling in gold letters. And there it was, clear as day. Wavelength Systems, founded by C. West. For a moment, I thought no one else noticed. Then I saw it, my mother's smile faltering her eyes, narrowing just slightly. My father leaned closer to whisper something. Ethan hesitated mid-sentence, then recovered. But I saw it. The cracks. When the speech ended, I made my move. I approached the table, calm, composed. My mother froze as I stopped in front of her. "Hello, Mother," I said softly. She blinked. Claire. The name sounded foreign on her tongue. "Surprised to see me?" I asked. Her eyes darted toward my badge. C. West, founder and CEO. She swallowed hard. You're the one behind Wavelength." I smiled faintly. Guilty. Ethan approached, tension in his jaw. "What are you doing here supporting the family foundation?" I said sweetly. "After all, I'm a sponsor now." He laughed, sharp and humorless. "Cute. You really think running a little company makes you one of us again?" I met his gaze steady. "Oh, I'm not trying to be one of you. I'm just making sure you remember who I am when you Google your donors tomorrow." A few nearby guests turned their heads. Ethan's smile tightened. "You haven't changed," he muttered. "No," I said quietly. "I've just stopped apologizing for who I became." I turned before he could answer, walking away. As flashbulbs popped again, this time aimed at me. That night, as Aiden drove us home, he glanced over. So he said, "Closure." I watched the lights of Beverly Hills fade in the rearview mirror. "Not yet," I said. "But the masks are starting to crack." He smiled. "Good. Let them." The next morning, our inbox exploded. Reporters wanted quotes. Investors wanted meetings. And the Whitmans, they went silent. But silence, I'd learned, wasn't peace. It was the sound of something beginning to break. The invitation came in the most predictable way possible, an email from my mother's assistant with the subject line, "Family Dinner." "This Friday, 7 p.m. No apology, no explanation. Just formality wrapped in etiquette, as if 3 years of exile could be brushed off with a calendar event. Aiden read it over my shoulder, eyebrows raised. "They really have a way with warmth, don't they?" I almost laughed. "If they're calling me now, it's not for reconciliation. It's for damage control." He tilted his head. "You're going—" I hesitated. "Yeah, I need to see how far they'll go to pretend they still have control." Friday came with the kind of nervous electricity that fills the air before a storm. I chose a simple outfit, a crisp white blouse, tailored pants, and understated jewelry. Power disguised as restraint. The restaurant was one of those Beverly Hills institutions where waiters spoke in whispers and the lighting was soft enough to make guilt look glamorous. When I arrived, they were already seated in the private dining room. My mother in pearls. My father in his ever-perfect navy suit. Ethan, of course, playing host, that infuriating Whitman grin still intact. "Claire," my mother said, her voice clipped but sweet. "You look, well." "Thank you," I said, taking my seat. "Success has a way of improving one's health." Ethan chuckled, swirling his wine. "Still dramatic, huh? Still pretending, huh?" I replied lightly. My father cleared his throat, the universal sign to stop talking before the truth ruined dinner. "Let's not start with hostility," he said. "We wanted to talk as a family." "Family?" I raised an eyebrow. "Last time we spoke, you said I'd embarrassed the family name beyond repair." He shifted in his chair. "That was a different time." "Ah," I said, leaning back. "The pre-Wavelength era." Silence. My mother reached for her glass, avoiding my eyes. Ethan's jaw twitched. "You've made quite a splash," he said finally. "National attention. Congratulations." "Thank you. I built something from nothing. You know, like you always told me I couldn't." He smiled without warmth. "You've always been good at surprising people." The waiter arrived, pouring wine, saving them from answering. When he left, my mother began her performance. "Claire, darling," she said, her tone softened by diplomacy. "We've been thinking, perhaps there's a way to mend things between us. Appearances matter, and the press seems fascinated by you right now. It would be nice to show unity. A family feature, perhaps a joint interview." There it was. The real reason. Not love, Optics. I laughed a quiet, sharp sound that made them all shift uncomfortably. You want to use my success to polish your reputation? My father frowned. That's an unfair accusation. Is it? I asked. Where was this concern when I was serving coffee at 2 a.m, or when you cut me out of your will without even calling? Ethan leaned forward, irritation flashing in his eyes. You left. You made your choice. No, I said softly. You made it for me when you decided love was conditional. For a moment, no one spoke. The silence wasn't peaceful, it was suffocating. Finally, my mother said, Claire, you've always misunderstood us. We only wanted what was best for you. I met her gaze. No, you wanted what looked best for you. Aiden had told me not to let anger win. He'd said real revenge was quiet, clean. So I smiled. But since we're being honest, I have a proposal. That got their attention. My father straightened, his business instincts kicking in. I'm listening. I'll agree to a public appearance, I said, watching their eyes flicker with hope. 1 interview, 1 photo shoot. We can call it The Whitman Legacy, A New Era. Ethan smirked, finally seeing reason. I leaned forward, my voice low. On one condition, we do it my way. My studio. My publication. My father hesitated. Which outlet? I smiled. Forbes. They're featuring the top 10 young billionaires next month. The color drained from my mother's face. My father blinked. You're on that list? Yes, I said, calm as water. Number 8. The silence that followed was thick enough to taste. Ethan looked like he'd swallowed glass. I stood smoothing my blouse. You should be proud, I said softly. The Whitman name is back on top, just not because of you. My mother's voice trembled. Claire, wait. But I was already walking away. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't slam the door. I just left them sitting there, 3 people trapped in the empire they built on pretense. Outside, the night air felt cleaner than it had in years. I dialed Aiden as I walked to my car. How was dinner? He asked. Enlightening, I said. Turns out they still think I'm part of their world. He chuckled. And are you? I looked up at the city skyline, the lights glittering like 1,000 second chances. Not anymore, I said. I'm building my own. He was quiet for a moment. Then you'd better get ready. Once that list drops, the world will know who you are. I smiled, sliding into my car. Good. Let them see what happens when a poor waitress stops serving and starts leading. The engine hummed, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was running from my past. I was driving straight through it, toward the life I'd built, toward the reckoning they didn't see coming. It happened on a Monday morning, quiet, ordinary, and unforgettable. I was still half asleep when my phone began vibrating nonstop on the nightstand. Aiden's name flashed across the screen. I groaned, reached for it, and answered, If this isn't about coffee, I'm hanging up. He was breathless. Turn on the TV? What? Just do it. I fumbled for the remote, flicked through channels until I landed on CNBC. And there it was, my name. Big, bold, undeniable. Claire West, founder and CEO of Wavelength Systems, ranked number 8 on Forbes' top 10 young billionaires. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The photo they used was one from our last conference, me in a navy suit, arms folded, smiling in a way I didn't recognize. Confidence. Free. The headline scrolled beneath it, The Self-Made Woman Who Changed Digital Marketing Forever. I sat there in stunned silence, coffee growing cold beside me, as the anchors spoke about her remarkable rise and the mysterious entrepreneur who built an empire from nothing. They talked about my methods, my strategy, my impact. They called me visionary. They called me unstoppable. They had no idea. Aiden arrived 20 minutes later, grinning like a kid at Christmas. You're trending on every platform, he said, dropping his phone onto the couch. You broke the internet. Please tell me you're exaggerating, I muttered. He wasn't. The hashtags were everywhere. Claire West, from waitress to billionaire, shush, wavelength, empire. I scrolled through thousands of posts, articles, reaction videos, congratulatory comments from strangers who saw a version of themselves in my story. And then buried among the noise, a name I hadn't seen in years, Whitman. My brother's wife had posted a single cryptic tweet, proud of family success stories. No tags, no context. But the message was clear. They'd recognized me. By noon, the phone calls started. Reporters, investors, old acquaintances pretending to be friends. I turned them all down. I didn't need interviews or applause. The truth was already loud enough. But that afternoon, one call stopped me cold. Private number. I almost ignored it. Then a voice I hadn't heard in 3 years filled the line. Claire, my father. For a second, I said nothing. The last time he'd spoken my name, it was to sign me out of his life. I saw the news, he said finally. Impressive. Thanks, I said flatly. You sound surprised. He cleared his throat. I admit I didn't think you'd make it this far on your own. I didn't need your permission. Silence. Then, your mother wants to see you. Tonight? I almost laughed. Why now? She regrets things. We both do. Regret. Such an easy word, like a band-aid for years of deliberate cruelty. I took a breath. Tell her I'll think about it. He exhaled with relief, as if I'd forgiven them already. Good. We'll have dinner tomorrow. The house hasn't changed much, I said. Then I hung up. Aiden was watching me from the kitchen doorway. Let me guess, he said. The ghosts of Christmas past. Something like that. What are you going to do? I looked at the television screen still glowing faintly with my name. I'm going to let them see what they threw away. The next day, I didn't wear designer clothes or armor myself with power. I chose simplicity black trousers, white shirt, no makeup except for the confidence that came from earning my place. The Whitman mansion looked smaller than I remembered, though it hadn't changed. Maybe it was me. My mother met me at the door. For a moment, neither of us spoke. She looked older, softer around the eyes, but the pearls were still there, the posture still perfect. Claire, she said finally, voice trembling, you look beautiful. Success has a way of improving appearances, I said quietly. She winced but smiled anyway. We're proud of you. Are you? I asked. Or just proud that you can say I'm yours again? Her smile faltered. You've always been ours. Not when it mattered. We walked to the dining room. My father stood by the window glass of bourbon in hand, pretending this was normal. You've made headlines, he said. Quite the turnaround story. Funny, I said. I don't remember you liking stories without control over the ending. Ethan arrived last, his confidence cracked but not shattered. Well, he said, forcing a grin. Look who made it to Forbes. Guess hard work pays off. Guess it does, I replied. Too bad it's not hereditary. He scoffed. Don't start. I'm not starting anything. Just acknowledging that success doesn't run in the blood. It runs in the effort. Dinner was quiet after that. Forks scraped plates, small talk fluttered and died. My parents tried to steer the conversation towards civility, but the air was thick with unspoken history. Finally, my mother asked, What do you want, Claire? I looked at her. Nothing, I said truthfully. That's what scares you, isn't it? That I don't need anything from you anymore. My father's jaw tightened. We could still work together, you know. Merge our resources. Whitman Real Estate and Wavelink. Imagine the coverage. I laughed low and steady. Imagine the hypocrisy. Ethan leaned back. You think you're better than us? No, I said softly. Just freer. When I left that night, the house behind me glowed with expensive emptiness. For years I dreamed of walking back through those doors triumphant, proving them wrong. But standing there, I realized something winning wasn't about being recognized by them. It was about no longer needing to be. As I drove home, my phone buzzed with another flood of messages, partnership offers, congratulatory texts, and one headline that made me smile. Whitman heiress cut. From inheritance now tops family fortune. The irony was poetic. By midnight, I turned off my phone, poured myself a glass of wine, and stood by the window watching the city lights pulse below. Aiden's words echoed in my head. The best revenge is success they can't take credit for. I smiled. Finally, I understood what peace felt like. It wasn't silence. It was being heard without having to say a word. The knock on my door came just after dawn, sharp, deliberate, and far too early for good news. I was halfway through my first cup of coffee when I opened it to find Ethan standing there in a perfectly pressed suit, sunglasses still on despite the cloudy morning. He looked exactly as he had at his wedding expensive confident hollow. "Claire," he said, voice smooth as ever. "Can we talk?" I leaned against the doorframe. "Last time you said that you were laughing at me while I carried a tray of champagne." He flinched barely. "Yeah, I remember. Impressive. I wasn't sure memory was one of your strengths." He took off his sunglasses. His eyes looked different this time, less arrogance, more calculation. "Look, I know you hate me. I probably deserve that. But I wouldn't be here if it wasn't important. That makes one of us." He sighed, exasperated. "Can we talk inside?" I stepped aside, more curious than charitable. "You've got 5 minutes before I start charging consulting fees." He laughed nervously and sat at the edge of the couch like he was afraid of touching anything too human. "It's about Dad," he said finally. "And the company." I didn't sit. "What about it? There's been an investigation. A few of his development projects were funded through offshore accounts. Journalists are asking questions. Investors are pulling out. We're hemorrhaging money." I folded my arms. "And this involves me." "How Wavelink is clean," he said quickly. "That's why we thought, well, Dad thought maybe there's a way to present a united front. You know, as a family. You could help you save the Whitman name," I finished for him. He nodded. "You've rebuilt your image. People love you. If they see us together, it might." I couldn't help it. I laughed. A full, genuine laugh that startled him. "You want me to fix the reputation of the same people who tried to erase mine?" His jaw tightened. "It's not like that. It's exactly like that." He stood frustrated. "You don't understand what's at stake here." "Oh, I do?" I said, stepping closer. "I understand perfectly. What's at stake is the illusion you built. The empire of glass you thought was unbreakable. And now that it's cracking, you came looking for the one person who knows how to rebuild things because I actually worked for it." His shoulders slumped. "You're still angry." "No," I said quietly. "I'm finally not." He stared at me for a long moment. "Dad's not doing well," he said, voice lower. He won't admit it, but he's scared. He wanted me to ask you to visit. The words hit somewhere I didn't expect. I wanted to say no. I wanted to slam the door to remind myself of every cruel word they'd ever spoken. But part of me, the part that still remembered Sunday breakfasts and piano lessons, hesitated. "I'll think about it," I said finally. That night I found myself standing in front of the Whitman estate again. The grand white gates loomed exactly as they had the day I left, with nothing but a suitcase and a bruised heart. I half expected the guard to turn me away. Instead, he opened the gate with a nod. "They're expecting you, Ms. West." Ms. West. The name they once mocked now carried more weight than theirs. Inside the house felt smaller, colder. My father sat in his study, surrounded by papers and empty glasses. He looked older than I remembered, shoulders heavy. Confidence dimmed. When he saw me, he tried to stand, but stopped halfway, wincing. "Claire," he said quietly. "You came." I nodded. "Ethan said you wanted to see me." He gestured for me to sit. "Things are bad," he admitted. "Worse than the press knows. I made mistakes." I watched him waiting for the performance. It didn't come. His voice was rough, stripped of authority. "Your mother's been worried sick. Ethan's trying, but he's not built for this. Built for what I asked." "Loss," he said simply. "For a long time, we just sat there, two people who'd finally run out of power plays." "I'm not asking for your help," he said eventually. "Not really. I just needed to see you, to tell you. You were right to walk away. The things we called success, they were cages. You were the only one brave enough to escape." I didn't know what to say. The man who once told me I was unworthy of the Whitman name was now confessing that he'd destroyed the meaning of it himself. "I wanted to make you proud," I whispered. "You did," he said, just not in the way I was smart enough to understand. The silence that followed wasn't heavy this time. It was clean. When I left, my mother was waiting in the foyer. She didn't speak at first, just looked at me with eyes full of something I'd never seen from her before: humility. "You look like him when you're strong," she said softly. "But you have my heart. I see that now." For once I didn't argue. I just nodded. Outside, Ethan was waiting by the car, hands in his pockets. "How did it go?" I glanced back at the house. "Different," I said. "Maybe that's enough." He gave a small smile. "We'll figure it out. Somehow." "Maybe you will," I said. "Just don't expect me to clean up the mess. My legacy doesn't start here. It starts where you stop believing in me." He nodded slowly. "Fair enough." I got into my car, closed the door, and let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding for years. The drive home was quiet, the city lights blurring through the windshield like ghosts dissolving into air. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was running away from the Whitmans. I was simply moving forward without needing them to follow. It started with a headline: "Whitman Group under federal investigation for financial misconduct." I saw it flash across my phone one morning while sipping coffee on the balcony, the ocean humming below. For a moment I thought it was some clickbait article, another rumor meant to stir social media outrage. But as I scrolled, reading words like fraud shell companies, offshore accounts, I realized it was real. And the photos: my father's stony face, Ethan's forced smile, my mother hiding behind sunglasses, confirmed what I already knew: the empire was finally cracking. By noon, every major network had picked up the story. The family name that once meant prestige now screamed scandal. Anonymous sources, legal subpoenas, investors running for cover. It was a free fall, and this time there was no one left to cushion it. Aiden walked into my office holding 2 coffees. "You've seen it." "Yeah," I said quietly, setting my phone down. "It was only a matter of time." He studied me for a moment. "You don't look happy." "I'm not," I said. "I'm not sad either. Just done." He nodded. "They built their castle on image. You built yours on work. Eventually, the truth always tips the scale." We didn't talk about it after that. We didn't need to. The fall of the Whitmans was no longer my battle, it was their consequence. Still, curiosity pulled me to watch. The footage from outside the courthouse was a theater of pride unraveling. My father, once the picture of composure, stood beside a lawyer, jaw tight, as cameras shouted his name. My mother's pearl necklace was gone. Her fingers trembled as she tried to shield her face. Ethan tried to smile, but it looked more like a grimace. Reporters called it the collapse of an empire built on illusion. They were right. And as I watched, I realized something strange. I felt nothing. No triumph, no vindication. Just quiet understanding. This was the ending I used to fantasize about back when revenge burned hot in my chest. Now it was just ash. That evening I received another unexpected visitor. When I opened the door, Chloe stood there, Ethan's wife. She looked smaller somehow, her usual gloss of perfection replaced by fear. "Claire," she said softly. I didn't know where else to go. I motioned for her to come in. "You look like hell," I said. Not unkindly. She gave a weak laugh. "You always had a way with honesty." We sat at the kitchen counter. She wrapped her hands around a mug of tea like it might stop her from shaking. "They froze our accounts. The cars, the house, everything's under investigation. I didn't even know about the offshore stuff. Ethan said it was tax optimization." I raised an eyebrow. He always did have creative definitions for honesty. Tears welled in her eyes. "He's facing charges, Claire. I don't know what to do." I wanted to be cruel. I wanted to remind her how she'd laughed that day at the wedding, how she'd called me a poor waitress like it was a disease. But instead I said quietly, "You'll figure it out. You're stronger than you think." She blinked, surprised. "You're not going to say I deserve this." I shook my head. "You already know you do. My saying it won't change anything." She covered her face with her hands. "You must hate us." "I did," I admitted. "Now I just don't care enough to hate." We sat in silence, the kind that feels like confession. When she left, she hugged me, awkward, desperate. I didn't return it, but I didn't pull away either. After she was gone, Aiden came out of the study. You're a better person than I am, he said. I smiled faintly. No, I'm just tired. Over the next few weeks, the story consumed the news cycle. Each day brought another revelation, another collapse. My father stepped down as CEO. Ethan was charged with securities fraud. My mother disappeared from public life entirely. The Whitman name, once a symbol of influence, had become a cautionary tale whispered in boardrooms. Then one morning my assistant knocked on my office door. You have a call, she said. It's your father. I hesitated before picking up. His voice was smaller than I remembered. Claire. I said. I wanted to apologize. For what? For everything, he said quietly. I thought control was power. Turns out power without integrity is just noise. I didn't know what to say. The man who once disowned me was now seeking absolution I didn't have the heart to give. Are you all right? I asked. He gave a soft, tired laugh. No, but I will be. Watching you. Build something honest. It made me realize how wrong we were. I'm proud of you, Claire. The words I'd waited my whole life to hear arrived too late to matter. And yet part of me was grateful. Take care of yourself, I said. You too, he replied. And Claire, thank you for not becoming like us. When the line went dead, I sat for a long time staring out the window. The city glittered beneath me, alive, relentless, indifferent. That night, Aiden and I walked along the pier. The air was cool, the sky smeared with stars. You know, he said you could buy the Whitman properties now. They're being liquidated. I laughed softly. What would I do with ghosts? Bury them properly, he said. I thought about it for a moment, then shook my head. No, let them fade. Some names don't deserve resurrection. He slipped his hand into mine. Then what now? I looked out at the horizon where the sea met the dark. Now I said we build something worth remembering. And as the waves crashed against the shore, I realized the truth. Revenge wasn't about watching them fall. It was about rising without them. The invitation came in an ivory envelope with gold lettering, just like the one I'd received 3 years ago. Same venue, same elegant gold detailing. Only this time it wasn't Ethan's name at the top. It was mine. Aiden had convinced me to host a charity gala through Wavelengths Foundation, a formal event benefiting women entrepreneurs from underserved communities. When the press called it the Wedding of Redemption after learning the venue was the same as my brother's infamous ceremony, I didn't correct them. The irony was too perfect. I walked through the ballroom the day before the event, watching the staff string lights across the ceiling. It was the same space where I once carried trays of champagne ignored and mocked by people who shared my blood. Now, every vendor, every camera, every invitation bore my company's logo. Aiden walked beside me, hands in his pockets. Are you sure you're ready for this? I smiled. I've been ready since the night they laughed. He grinned. Then let's make it unforgettable. The night of the gala shimmered with a kind of poetic symmetry. Cameras flashed. Journalists whispered. Guests in designer gowns sipped cocktails, while a string quartet played softly in the background. But the moment I stepped through the glass doors, the chatter quieted. The same faces that once dismissed me now turned in awe. Is that her? Someone whispered. The billionaire I didn't need to answer. My presence was enough. Then near the back of the room, I saw them, my parents. My mother was still poised, though the sparkle had dulled. My father stood beside her, humility now etched where pride used to be. And next to them, Ethan, looking like a ghost of himself. For a brief second, the air between us felt heavy with all the years, all the words unsaid. But then the host's voice filled the room. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our keynote speaker, Claire West, CEO of Wavelength Systems. Applause thundered. I took the stage under a sea of lights. 3 years ago, I served drinks in this very room. I was invisible then, just another face in the background. But what I didn't know that night was that invisibility can be a blessing. It teaches you who you are when no one's watching. A murmur rippled through the crowd. I smiled. I learned that worth isn't inherited. It's earned by showing up, by failing, by trying again when no one believes in you. And tonight, we're here to make sure more women get that same chance. The applause grew louder, but my eyes never left my family. My mother's chin trembled. My father's gaze dropped. Ethan looked away completely. After the speech, reporters surrounded me asking for comments about the gala, about the poetic comeback. I smiled politely but kept my answers focused on the foundation. This night wasn't about revenge, it was about reclamation. Still, fate has a sense of timing. As the crowd began to thin, I heard my name. Claire. I turned. My mother stood there, clutching her clutch like it was armor. "That was beautiful," she said softly. "Your speech. You've grown so much." I studied her face, the lines that hadn't been there before. Growth happens when you stop waiting for permission. She flinched, then nodded. I deserved that. My father joined her, his voice quieter than I'd ever heard it. "We're proud of you. Truly." I didn't answer right away. The girl I used to be would have melted at those words, but I wasn't her anymore. "Thank you," I said finally. But pride doesn't erase the past. It just means you finally started to see it. He nodded. "Maybe that's enough." Ethan approached next, hesitant. "Claire, I interrupted gently. "You don't owe me an apology, Ethan. You owe yourself one." He looked at me for a long moment before saying, "You really made it, huh?" "Yes," I said. "And I didn't have to step on anyone to do it." He gave a small, broken smile. "Guess that's the difference between us." "Guess it is." When they walked away, I felt no bitterness, only closure. Later that night, after the guests had left and the lights dimmed, I stood in the empty ballroom with Aiden. The same room where everything had once ended now felt like the beginning of something entirely new. He came up behind me, resting his hands gently on my shoulders. "You did it," he said. I turned to face him. "We did it." He smiled. "How does it feel?" "Like peace," I said. "Like justice without the noise." We walked toward the exit together. Outside, the night air was cool and bright with city lights. I looked back once more at the ballroom, now quiet and glowing through the glass. "This place used to haunt me," I said softly. "Now it's just a building." Aiden squeezed my hand. "Because you changed the story." As we stepped into the waiting car, I realized he was right. The story had changed. Not because I'd destroyed the Whitmans, but because I'd outgrown them. The past was no longer a wound. It was a monument to survival. And tomorrow, I'd wake up not as the girl they pitied or the woman they feared, but as the one who finally stopped needing their approval to shine. The headlines came faster than the Whitmans could spin them. Whitman Group files for bankruptcy, amid legal troubles. Former CEO faces civil suit for fraud. Socialite Margaret Whitman sells Beverly Hills mansion. The empire that had defined my childhood marble floors, charity galas, magazine covers, was now reduced to court filings and clearance auctions. I didn't gloat, not once. The part of me that used to crave poetic justice was gone, replaced by something colder, quieter distance. I'd fought too long to build peace to ruin it with triumph. Still, it was surreal to watch the collapse play out. I scrolled through photos of the estate I'd once called home empty, now the auction listing describing it as a property with potential. I almost laughed. Potential. That's what they'd said about me once. Aiden walked into my office holding a stack of papers. "You've been offered the chance to buy it," he said. I looked up. "The house?" He nodded. "Through a private broker. They think you might want to make a statement." I leaned back in my chair. Buying it would make me exactly what they used to be, someone obsessed with appearances. He smiled. "So that's a no. That's a never." I thought back to my father's study, the smell of old books and expensive whiskey. How small it had felt when I visited him months ago. I wondered if he'd known this was coming, if he'd felt the walls close in long before the world did. Later that night, my phone buzzed. It was a number I didn't recognize, but I answered anyway. "Claire." It was Ethan. His voice was unsteady, tired. I didn't know who else to call. I hesitated. Are you all right? He gave a dry laugh. Define all right. The company's gone. My accounts are frozen. Chloe left. Dad's in assisted care. Mom won't talk to reporters. I'm somewhere between disaster and reality check. I'm sorry, I said quietly, and I meant it. He let out a breath. You know, when we were kids, I thought you were weak because you cared so much. Turns out that was your strength. There was a pause. Then he said I was wrong about you, Claire. I know. He chuckled softly. Yeah, of course you do. We stayed on the phone longer than I expected, not talking about money or legacy, just memories. The lake house summers, the time we got caught sneaking cookies from the pantry. For a moment, it almost felt like we were kids again before the world taught us to compete instead of connect. After we hung up, I sat in the dark for a long time, the hum of the city outside my window. I realized then that this quiet, steady calm was what victory truly felt like. Not applause, not revenge, just peace. The next morning, I met with my team at Wavelink to finalize a new initiative, the Phoenix Project, a funding program for young women from working-class backgrounds who wanted to start businesses but lacked access to capital. Aiden flipped through the proposal. You're giving away $10 million in seed funding, he said. I smiled. Technically, I'm investing it in someone else's comeback. He leaned back, nodding slowly. You know you could make this personal. Tell your story. It would double the reach. I shook my head. It's not about me anymore. But the truth was, it was about me, about the girl who once carried trays of drinks and was told she'd never belong. About the daughter who watched her family trade love for status. About the woman who finally learned that success means nothing if you have to become what you hate to keep it. 2 weeks later, I received a letter in a familiar handwriting. No return address. Just my name written carefully across the envelope. Inside was a single note. I saw your interview. You were magnificent. You remind me of the woman your mother once wanted to be before the world taught her to perform instead of feel. Take care of yourself, sweetheart. Dad. I held the letter for a long time, unsure whether to cry or smile. In the end, I did neither. I just folded it back into the envelope and placed it in the top drawer of my desk. That night, I drove out to the cliffs overlooking the ocean. The air smelled like salt and freedom. Aiden joined me, leaning against the railing beside me. Do you ever think about what would have happened if they hadn't kicked you out? He asked. I laughed softly. Yeah, I'd probably still be living someone else's version of success. He nodded. And now? Now, I said, I get to define it for myself. The waves crashed below, steady and infinite. They'll survive, I added quietly. Maybe not as Whitmans, but as people. And maybe that's the first honest thing they've ever been. Aiden slipped his arm around me. And you, I smiled. I already survived. The rest is just living. For the first time, the story didn't feel like a battle anymore. It felt like a beginning. The Whitmans had fallen, but I hadn't needed to push. I just had to rise. And sometimes that's all revenge ever needs to be. 2 years later, I stood on a stage in San Francisco beneath a glowing banner that read, Wavelink Women's Initiative, empowering the next generation of founders. The room was filled with faces that reminded me of where I started: waitresses, single mothers, women who worked 2 jobs and still dreamed bigger than their circumstances. I looked out at them and felt something deeper than pride. It felt like belonging. Success, I said into the microphone, isn't about where you start, it's about refusing to stay there. It's not about being the richest person in the room. It's about being the one who opens the door for someone else to walk through. Applause erupted, but my voice didn't shake this time. I wasn't the girl who needed to prove anything anymore. I was the woman who had turned her pain into purpose. After the ceremony, a young woman approached me. She looked barely 20, holding a folder of business sketches with trembling hands. Miss West, she said, I just wanted to say your story changed my life. I used to think people like me didn't stand a chance. But now I'm starting my own company next month. I smiled, recognizing that spark in her eyes. Then promise me one thing, I said. When someone else looks up to you, you'll tell them what I'm telling you now you already belong. You just have to act like it. Her eyes filled with tears. I will. That night after the event, I drove down the coast with Aiden. The sun had long set, leaving a silver shimmer over the ocean. We stopped at a quiet overlook, the kind where the world feels endless and small all at once. He leaned against the hood of the car. Do you ever think about them, the Whitmans? I asked. He nodded. Sometimes, I said, but not the way I used to. I don't think of them as villains anymore. Just people who never learned how to love without condition. He smiled softly. You did. I had to, I said, or I'd still be waiting for it. I told him about the letter my father had sent before he passed, a final apology written in shaky ink. How my mother had moved to a small coastal town and opened an art studio painting sunsets she used to ignore. Even Ethan had found something resembling peace teaching business ethics at a community college. Guess we all start over eventually, Aiden said. Yeah, I whispered. The difference is I didn't wait for permission. We stood there for a while listening to the waves. The wind carried the scent of salt and memory. I thought of that night years ago, the night I thought I'd never be more than a waitress while my brother and his friends laughed. If someone had told me then that one day I'd stand where I was now, I would have laughed too. But life has a strange way of paying attention when you stop begging it to. A week later, Forbes published another feature, The Women Redefining Power. My photo was there again, but this time I didn't cringe when I saw it. The caption didn't list my net worth or rank me by earnings. It said Claire West, founder, philanthropist, visionary, known for turning adversity into opportunity and success into significance. That line made me pause. Success into significance. Maybe that was the truest definition of revenge, not outshining those who doubted you, but using your light to make sure no one else is left in the dark. The following weekend, Aiden and I hosted a small dinner at our home. No reporters, no investors, just friends, laughter, and real warmth. At one point, I stepped out onto the porch to breathe in the night air. The house behind me glowed softly alive with conversation. Aiden came out carrying 2 glasses of wine. You disappeared again, he teased. Just taking it in, I said. Sometimes I forget how far we've come. He handed me a glass. You earned every step. I smiled. Not earned, chosen. He tilted his head. Chosen. I used to think success was something you won, I said. Now I know it's something you decide. I decided to stop letting people define me. I decided to forgive. I decided to be more than what they saw. He raised his glass. To decisions, then. To decisions, I echoed. As we clinked glasses, my phone buzzed with a notification. A trending post. Someone had reshared an old clip from that night at Ethan's wedding, the one where I stood frozen while they mocked me. The caption read, "Never underestimate the quiet ones." I stared at the screen for a moment, then laughed. Full circle, I murmured. Aiden leaned closer. Does it bother you? Not anymore, I said. Because that girl in the video, she was the reason I became this woman. The wind picked up, rustling the trees. Somewhere in the distance, the city lights shimmered like reminders that even darkness can't stop something meant to shine. I took a deep breath, closing my eyes. The noise, the memories, the pain, all of it felt distant now, like a story I'd once read but no longer lived. When I opened my eyes, Aiden was watching me. What are you thinking? He asked. I smiled. That revenge isn't about payback. It's about peace. And maybe, I said softly, it's about becoming the kind of person they could never destroy. He wrapped an arm around me, and we stood there in silence, the world soft and wide around us.